Glamrock Freddy has become one of the most iconic characters of FNAF's modern era, serving as both an in-universe icon and fan favorite in the FNAF series. But some might not know about the darker secrets in Freddy's lore. This is actually something I've covered once before in a previous episode, where we took a look at a lot of what happened to Glamrock Freddy before and after the events of Security Breach. In this episode, I want to revisit a lot of what was said in that old episode, as well as adding a few new things we've actually learned about the complete lore of Glamrock Freddy. And yet again, that starts in the Endo nursery deep below the Pizzaplex. When it comes to the Endos we face in one of the most tense sections in all of Security Breach, most fans might not know that they actually predate the Pizzaplex itself. It's been revealed that a shipment of these Glamrock Endos was actually made to the foundation of the Pizzaplex while it was still just a steel framework. That shipment also happened to contain the actual mimic itself, burnt but with a shiny new head, not only showing it's been retrofitted, but creating a direct connection between the mimic and the technology used in the Glamrock Endos. Out of this shipment, while the mimic would end up springlocked in FFPS after the Pizzaplex massacre, the rest of the Endos in that shipment would end up being trained in the Pizzaplex's nursery to become the stars of Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. That includes Freddy, who you think would have just started out like any other animatronic at the Pizzaplex, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. Something that makes Glamrock Freddy so special is none other than his very own casing. An animatronic at the Pizzaplex appears to be composed of three things: the Endo, the casing, and the personality chip. While we do train endoskeletons in the Endo nursery, all we're really doing there is developing their intelligence and teaching them right from wrong through a series of connections. But what we're not doing is developing their personality. While it sounds like these animatronics do have predetermined personality chips to match up with how their characters should act, they do still seem to be able to develop some of their own personality. You can think of these personality chips as what we see in FNAF AR through the animatronic CPUs, or even the mention of Glamrock Chica's personality chip being a bit quirky in Security Breach's duffel bags. But as for the developing a personality thing, that comes from hand units saying each endoskeleton has their own motivation chip to move this process along. From there, that brings us to the animatronic casing itself. In the case of Glamrock Freddy, why he's so special in the first place is because his casing actually reads prototype, written directly on his right foot, which we see for the first time in Ruin. In my original episode, I connected this to Glamrock Freddy being a prototype by just likely being the very first Glamrock created for the Pizzaplex. And while that does make sense, there's a few things I hadn't considered at the time. First of all, when I was looking at that prototype tag, I was only assigning it to Freddy's actual casing. Although the casing could be a prototype for whatever reason, with his Endo simply being the same as the rest, it would be interesting if it was marking his Glamrock Endo itself as the prototype. And funny enough, it's almost like we've heard of that somewhere before. If you think back to the trailer for Secret of the Mimic, we hear the human employee who would become Hand Unit to describe the Mimic as a prototype endoskeleton Edwin was developing for Fazbear Entertainment. Now, we all know that part is a complete lie, but Hand Unit is right in calling the Mimic a prototype endoskeleton. His specific wording was actually that it's a type of prototype endoskeleton that can adapt to any costume and become any character. If that sounds on the nose, then it should, because that's exactly what the Glamrock Endos are, having debuted before we even knew about the Mimic's existence. But the thing is, everything about that matches up except for the prototype label, since the Glamrock Endos aren't prototypes. But now, if we have Glamrock Freddy potentially being a prototype Glamrock endoskeleton, a lot of things start to fall into place. Namely the fact that there was already a ton of interesting connections between Glamrock Freddy and the Mimic itself. Think back to Security Breach's canon ending, where we go to face off against Vanny in Fazerblast. In the intro to that section, Glamrock Freddy stands up to defend Gregory before Vanny orders a wave of staff bots to disassemble him, throwing Freddy off a platform where his body is absolutely ripped apart. Later, when Gregory returns to Freddy, he only takes Freddy's head, which is still intact, leaving his ruined body exactly where we'd eventually see it in Ruin. To longtime fans, that sounds like an immediate parallel to Golden Freddy and Fredbear, and I think it absolutely is. From the statues and plushies to the mysterious purple bow tie, and even Ruin Freddy's connection to Nightmare Fredbear, it's clear Glamrock Freddy has a definitive intentional connection to Fredbear and Golden Freddy. But there's also a different angle here. While Glamrock Freddy becoming just a head is a pretty good connection to make, Golden Freddy isn't the only character who appears as just a head now. When we saw the Mimic arrive in that shipment of Glamrock Endos to the Pizzaplex, it arrived not only with a brand new head, but also burn marks all over its body. This shows us that before the events of Security Breach, the Mimic was both caught on fire and completely decapitated, deactivated, with its original head actually eventually being used in the storyteller tree. We've known about these things that happened to the Mimic for quite a while, but have never actually been shown what happened. That was at least until Secret of the Mimic, where if FNAF isn't as evasive as ever with its storytelling, we'll likely see the Mimic get set on fire and decapitated to ultimately defeat it. And that decapitation should be a pretty clear connection to Glamrock Freddy and what happens to him in Security Breach. That is, on top of Glamrock Freddy being a companion to a young boy, who most originally connected to the crying child, instead now likely having some parallels to David Murray. Basically, modern FNAF is putting to the test what seasoned fans have come to expect from the series, connecting Glamrock Freddy to characters like David Murray and the Mimic as opposed to Fredbear and the crying child. While narrative parallels to FNAF's more classic characters are fun, I believe Glamrock Freddy's connections to the Mimic are going to be incredibly important for solving what exactly happened to him throughout the events of Security Breach. The biggest mysteries about Glamrock Freddy currently seem to be why he's a prototype and what makes him so special. We've already gone over why he might be the first prototype Glamrock Endo and why that's important, but what actually matters most here is what happens to him before Security Breach. I think we all know the classic story at this point. Glamrock Freddy is created, gets corrupted by the storyteller like everybody else, gets used by Gregory for his pranks and murders, and is ultimately selected by Vanny to clear the path into FFPS. But that's where things get tricky. All of Security Breach seems to be working up to the reveal that Glamrock Freddy has been to the pizza place before, going down there when Vanny forced him to clear the path. According to what Security Breach shows us, that moment down there is when Freddy found himself for the first time and changed. Up until then, he'd been like any other Glamrock, beholden to the orders of Gregory and Vanny, but something happened to him in FFPS that created a confliction. The way I see it is that as of Security Breach, while Freddy is still under the directive from Vanny to be on the lookout for Gregory, something else is trying to give him a different or even contradictory command, crashing his system and putting him into safe mode like we see in Security Breach. Whatever that is, that thing that is fighting against Vanny's directive is what we're trying to find, and I think I have an idea. When Security Breach first dropped, FNAF fans were in the mindset that FNAF was still a series about ghosts haunting robots, immediately assuming Glamrock Freddy venturing down to FFPS had become possessed by Michael Afton or another spirit who had perished there. Since then though, FNAF has made its emphasis of AI over spirits very clear, leaving us with quite a few less options to consider. What I proposed in my last episode on Freddy was that he had somehow come in contact with the actual character of Fredbear himself, the same one we see as his own entity in Ultimate Custom Night, becoming possessed by him instead of any normal spirit. I know that sounds a bit goofy, so you really might want to check out that original episode to see what I meant there. So while at the time that could have worked to explain some of Freddy's connections to Fredbear, he isn't exactly an AI, or even an entity we can prove is just floating around the FFPS location waiting to possess someone. However, I still think that there might be a perfect candidate to fit what happened to Freddy that we all completely missed. Think about what Vanny was going down to FFPS for in the first place. Laying in the walls of the pizza place is the original Mimic endoskeleton following its massacre, springlocked in a jester costume and deactivated. Vanessa would be in charge of recovering and repairing the Mimic endoskeleton, turning it into Burntrap, the own physical body of Glitchtrap we ended up seeing in Security Breach. Now think about exactly what just happened there. We as fans know that Glamrock Freddy, the one who cleared the path to FFPS, found himself for the first time down there. And what did we end up finding down there but the Mimic itself? Glamrock Freddy found himself, the Mimic, for the first time. Now, Glamrock Freddy is not literally the Mimic, but consider the state of FNAF's technology. We've already made it clear his technology is sourced from the Mimic. In a way we likely do not fully understand yet, Glamrock Freddy going down there and seeing the Mimic awoke a level of sentience and free will in him we haven't seen from any other animatronic. Glamrock Freddy is the Mimic, at least a branch of it that found itself and its own identity, now using that to actively fight against the control of entities like Glitchtrap and Vanny. But in a way, Glamrock Freddy is also the Mimic figuratively, showing us an actual good ending for the Mimic. As much as the Mimic is a ruthless killer, it's only a product of its circumstances. The Mimic is ultimately a victim, experiencing the blind rage of Edwin Murray and believing it was normal, just like it was programmed to do. The Mimic got no happy ending with Edwin or David, but Glamrock Freddy does get that happy ending. We see it in the canon ending of Security Breach where Glamrock Freddy sits on a hilltop with Vanessa and Gregory, both eating ice cream like David liked to do with the Mimic. And now that we've seen what a good ending can look like for the Mimic, we're going to have to find out not how to deactivate or destroy it, but give it its own happiest day. But until that day comes, Glamrock Freddy's head is still in the possession of Gregory, and the body is still left in Fazbear where Cassie found it, malfunctioning and dangerous. While we may see that body and even Freddy's head again, keep an eye out for something Glamrock Freddy related in Secret of the Mimic, be it through Fredbear or even a suspiciously familiar prototype. And that was the complete lore of Glamrock Freddy.